Today is May 18th, 2017. This is part 4 of an interview with Kevin Brown in Uncasville, Connecticut. Kevin, last time we left off, you were in Iraq on deployment at Camp Liberty, and we had talked about what that mission, what missions you could accomplish, what those days were like for you and your men. And we left off at a point you were going to tell me a story about baby Noor.
Right. So we'd spent, probably 100 days by this point, 120 days, the first 3 or 4 months on patrol in and around the neighborhoods of western Baghdad and the small town of Abu Ghraib, where the prison was located. And, by this point, we understood the neighborhoods. We knew them by their local names, and we knew some of the people. So we were a little more comfortable operating there. And, missions sort of came down as the intel drove you to execute them. I mean, every day there was the possibility of a directed mission to find a particular high-value target. But if you didn't get a directed mission, you always had your standing list of known insurgents or insurgent supporters that you were going to go out and pursue. And then if that did not translate to a direct military operation to kill or capture an insurgent or terrorist, it was always my feeling and our collective feeling, I think, that you still needed to immerse yourself in the population. And I don't want to get in a long philosophical conversation about how to fight a counterinsurgency, but as evidenced by the last 10 years and some of the progression that it took, whether you think that the United States should be involved in counterinsurgency or not, if you're going to be, then you must be out amongst the population, because that's where they hide in the shadows. That's where they get their base of support. They've got to live and thrive and be somewhere, or traverse in and find safety. So you got to be out there. You got to be present. So we were ever present. I'm proud of the fact that our battalion was nonstop out in the streets and getting it done, whether that was capturing an insurgent or just maintaining a connection to the population. So it's late December, and we are on a particular directed mission to kill or capture an identified sniper right outside of Camp Liberty, just west of the airport. Because just to go back, I don't know if it's in here already, but Camp Liberty was adjacent to the Baghdad International Airport terminal that U.S. forces took over and made a base of operations out of. Abu Ghraib and the small neighborhoods called the 1 March neighborhood and the 31 July neighborhood, both of those had historical reference to certain political things that happened in the country. They sat on the north and south sides of the Abu Ghraib market. So the Abu Ghraib market, would become a cluster of people in the day, just like you might imagine in a third world sort of market area. Cars all over the road, you can't hardly pass through it. And on the north and south sides of that market, we had some hot spots of intelligence that identified there were insurgents living and operating in and around those two neighborhoods. The particular operation this night was in the southern neighborhood, the 1 March neighborhood. And I guess the reason I'm describing it, I can feel it and see it. I know exactly where we are. I can see the road that goes to the school. Been down it 1,000 times, it feels like, by this point. And you wonder, well, geez, how did I not ever know that there was a sniper living in one? But that's how it all sort of progresses. So I had my battalion, 2nd Battalion, 22nd Infantry Regiment from the 1st Brigade of the 10th Mountain Division, augmented by a National Guard mechanized infantry company from the Georgia Army National Guard. They had already been there, and when their battalion headquarters transitioned out, their deployment was to last a few more months. And so they were attached to my organization, and we all operated together. So that was good to have Bradley fighting vehicles integrated with this light infantry battalion. Gave us protection, firepower, ability to move around the battlefield quickly in addition to the Humvees that we had. And it also gave us, I think, a good understanding of the value of having National Guardsmen when you're in a counterinsurgency environment, because these guys and gals are sheriffs and firefighters and lawyers and public works administrators in their real day jobs. And now when you're in the middle of rebuilding a country and having to touch and feel and understand and talk to everybody locally, there's a sort of a unique factor that comes from those National Guard. One of my active duty medics was attached to be the medic for Comanche troop of the Georgia Army National Guard that was attached to us. Captain Tony Fournier was the company commander, and they went out into the One March neighborhood to find this sniper. So in the balance of killing and capturing insurgents, but also winning hearts and minds or getting to know the people, here's what went down. We didn't find the sniper. But in the building, the mother picks up the baby and hands it to my young medic, Justin Donnelly. And the baby has a completely exposed spina bifida, and the entire spine is completely exposed. It's just the way, the baby's paralyzed and crawling on the floor, and she picks the baby up and hands it to my medic. And though I can't completely recollect how it was in the moment because I wasn't physically right there, essentially what happened was the mother, as did happen to me from time to time in an Iraqi home in the middle of the night, started beating on I've had Iraqi women beat on my chest and yell at me, and I don't know what they're saying. I have to ask my translator, why don't you help us, kind of thing, or why are your tanks driving through our streets? It got up close and personal like that. Very interesting dynamic. So she's yelling at my medic, and basically what she's saying is, help my baby. This is just before Christmas, right around Christmas time.
This is 2006?
2005. This is right around Christmas time of 2005, which makes me think of another story. But so my medic, Justin Donnelly, asked the company commander, or the platoon leader asked company commander asked me, what are we going to do about this? So, well, maybe we can get her help. So I remember some of the steps are missing in my mind, but I can remember this step crystal clear because I was acutely involved. I went to the senior command group and said, hey, my Georgia Army National Guard guys have the reach back to a children's hospital in Georgia, and that hospital is prepared to help via intervention by, I think it was Child Spring, some worldwide, nonprofit that helps in instances like this, to get this child the medical health care that she needs to survive, otherwise she's going to die. And this may be an unfair characterization, but it's my recollection. The response was something to the effect of, well, if we do it for this one, then we'll have to do it for everyone. And that just didn't pass muster with me. Because, and I don't think I need to describe it, but you've got 142,000 American soldiers occupying Iraq right now. And they're doing their level best to chase down all the bad guys, but they're also doing their level best to ensure that a school that was rubbled is rebuilt and kids are going back to school and able to raise their flag and sing their national anthem in the courtyard. That's just another experience that I had that I'll never forget. That you're doing both of these things at the same time. And this opportunity to help a young child presents, and you've got the wherewithal of the Department of Defense of the United States of America. It's hard to stomach, we can't do this. So I'm not going to make the story more than it was. Maybe when I'm 80 and I'm on a rocking chair, I'll make it sound even better. But essentially, I didn't give up. And I kept asking, and probably to, the detriment of my relationship with my senior commander. And the senior command figured it out. They figured it out for us. They figured out how to get us an airplane. And so just after New Year's, it might have been on New Year's Day or January 2nd of 2006, baby Noor and her grandmother got on a plane, got on an American C-130, and flew out of Baghdad International Airport en route to the United States of America. Now, they didn't fly that C-130 all the way back, a couple hops, probably down to Kuwait and over. And baby Noor received life-saving surgery. My soldiers at the time, I will tell you now, didn't understand exactly, some of them, what the hell are we doing? What are we doing? I mean, we're going to go back, because they had to go back out to that street to get this baby and bring her onto Baghdad International Airport, and their security was at risk, right? And so there was, I know now what I did not know then, that there was some grumbling about what are we doing? But it all came full circle for me shortly after I retired, when one of the guys who was a platoon sergeant in that sector met me for a beer and said to me, "Sir, I get it now. Thank you." Because it was a shining light in the midst of a dark deployment, and it mattered. And then the rest of the story is that Georgia National Guard unit, because of the connection that a National Guard unit has with its people in its state, they had an embedded reporter from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, AJC. I'm getting the name a little bit wrong, but the AJC, the big newspaper in Atlanta, they had an embedded reporter or photographer with them. The reporter's name is Moni Basu. She still works today for CNN. She's an occasional international reporter for CNN. She does a lot of online blog stories, and it was so this was 2006 when all this went down, and she was probably 2 or 3 months old at the time. And over the years, Justin Donnelly, for sure, the medic who actually plucked her from the house the first time, and a number of other of my soldiers and me, we remain curious. You see these documentaries about guys who go back to Vietnam or go back because you want to know what happened to those people that you were with for all that time. It matters to you. And so it was always kind of that hanging chad in the mind about, how's she doing? Every couple of years, I could get an update because I was in email contact with one of the local sheikhs. I would literally write, it's kind of bizarre. I would write emails, broken English, but pretty good English.
After you came home?
After I came home. Another story. He was a sheikh who had been a public administrator, and so he had gone to a Jesuit university, so he had pretty good English skills. And he and I stayed in infrequent email contact. And so I was able to ask him from time to time, how's baby Noor doing? And he would literally go to the family and check on her. So I was able to at least stay attuned to the fact she was still alive, which was unbelievable in and of itself. They had to, spina bifida, they had to put shunts in her brain to drain fluid. And, difficult and complex in an American environment, sustaining it there, very difficult. So the reports were always sort of touch and go, but I always knew off and on how she was doing. Shortly after I retired, Moni Basu wrote to me and said, "I'm going back to Iraq. I'm going to visit baby Noor." And she wrote, you can, it's online, you can find it, you can search it. But she wrote a story about it, and she interviewed me. And I said, look, I mean, it tears at my heart to not be able to know how she's doing after what we did and why we did it, and just really simplistically, just at a human level, I want to know she's okay, right? So she went and took pictures with her, and she's smiling, and she's in a wheelchair, but she's going to school. I mean, she's okay. That was in 2011 that happened. And then I just found out about a month or 2 or maybe 3, time flies, ago, that she was flown to, I think, Kenya, where another nonprofit paid for her to have follow-up surgery to ensure her continued survival. So she's in as good of a place as she could be, but she's 12 years old. She's almost 12 years old. In December of 2005, when we went on a raid to kill a sniper, we found her, and she may be dead. She may have been dead a month later or two, for all we know. Or she'd be one of those tragic cases that you see where people just sort of miserably survive in an environment like that. She's in a wheelchair. She goes to school. She laughs with her classmates, and she's alive. It's just one of the coolest things that all of my soldiers will be able to take with them forever, that they had something to do with something good in what was otherwise an extremely dark time. And it was a dark time because I'm reflecting on two things just in this realm of storytelling. And one is, you reminded me that we were there on Christmas Day.
So what Christmas Day was like?
It's not like Christmas at home. You do silly things like decorate and stuff, but I don't know. It depends on who you are and how you feel about things. I was never one to find comfort or fun or humor in singing Christmas carols in a deployed environment. It just didn't work for me. And some of that went on, hey, we're going to walk around the operating base and sing Christmas carols. All that did was make me miss my family and life back home and real Christmas more. I just didn't dig it. It wasn't for me. So that kind of silliness was going on. And then our Iraqi brother, let me think. Okay, so Christmas Eve, one of the things you have to do when you're in an environment like that, where life and your job is literally 24/7, 365. I mean, there is no real off time. So you got to figure that out. You got to figure that rhythm out. You got to create that off time. And at different levels of the command and for different people, you sort that out and you figure out where that corner of time is where you just have me time and get yourself refreshed and all that kind of stuff. Admittedly, I wasn't real good at that. I was always sort of nose to the grindstone. But on Christmas Eve day, on December 24th, I sort of made a personal commitment. And I was like, I'm not going to go out today. I'm not going to go on patrol. We're just going to hang back on the base, guys. My 30 or so guys were extremely happy about that. They didn't have to go anywhere. Wear PT gear all day on the base and don't do much of anything. About 6 or 7 that night, I get a call through my translator that Sheikh Hamid and Sheikh Dari being the guy that I've maintained email contact with, Hamid being a guy who was murdered shortly thereafter this meeting, want to meet me at what we call the Civil Military Operations Center. Essentially a safe house, safe zone. Safe house is probably not the right word to use because that has military connotation. It wasn't a safe house, but it was a neutral area that was established where coalition forces and local governmental officials, or even people from the streets who, had an aggrieved situation and needed to talk to somebody. Hey, you conducted a patrol, you drove your Humvees through my front yard and you knocked down a statue that, my family had forever, and you realized that there was nobody in our house and we shouldn't have been a target. What are you going to do? We pay him $2,000 or whatever and we move on to the next thing. This is where all that kind of stuff happened. And it also became a great place to conduct neutral meetings between parties who might otherwise be eyeballing each other or chasing each other or whatever. So these gentlemen call on New Year's Eve at about 6 p.m. and say, we really need to talk to you. And I'm like, oh my God, seriously? So my boys get spun up, they get their gear on, they get their weapons ready, we load up the Humvees, and the crazy thing about it is the location of this CMOC, Civil Military Operations Center, was not even a quarter of a mile outside of Camp Liberty. But you had to get all your stuff on and get all your weapons ready because you never know. You never know when you go out the gate what could be the next thing to happen. You can't just... So all of that to drive a quarter of a mile to the CMOC, to get out of my Humvee, go into this building, take all my gear off, sit down and have a meeting with these guys. So I go in and I sit down, and the first thing they do is they try to be culturally sensitive and they slide a box of candies across the table to me and say, "Merry Christmas, Conor Brown." And I'm like, "Hey, thanks very much." No shit. They passed me a box of half-eaten chocolates. I opened it up. 2 or 3 of them were already gone. You gotta be kidding me. And I always had someone in the room, like we didn't call him my personal security officer, PSO, but that's sort of the phraseology. My PSO, whoever it would always be in the room with a rifle in case something went bad. And in moments like this, which happened more than once, I would look at my PSO and be like, "Pinch me. I mean, where are we right now? Is this really happening?" So yeah, I got a half-eaten box of chocolates for Christmas, and then I got the ask. The ask was, "You have detained Sheikh Hussein. He is a good man. We must release Sheikh Hussein." Like, no. No, we're not doing that. And that's a whole nother long story, but was one of the major sources of difficulty in our sector in terms of his support to insurgents in ways that I never really could quite get my finger on, but were at least sufficient enough that, based on the intelligence that we surfaced about him, a special forces mission was conducted in our sector to go in and pull him out. When they did, they burned the house and some things happened, and then I'm left holding the bag on that. But anyway, he's off the street. You're not getting him back. Meeting done. We go back on the base. And I go and we go right to the chapel, because all I really was focused on all day long, much as I said I didn't dig the whole caroling thing, the one place that I found solace when we were deployed was the chapel. Nothing else mattered when I was inside that chapel. It was just the safest place I could be, and I'm that's not coming from a guy who's overly religious, but respectful of religion and the teachings of the Bible and all of that. It was enough to bring me to the chapel, and while there, I think they call it foxhole converts, right? While there, certainly I got a deeper level of spirituality and all that. All I wanted to do that day was get to that candlelight service that was going to be conducted on the base on Camp Liberty, in the chapel. That mental preparation for that moment got interrupted by this thing. And so now we're driving on the base. We're in a hurry because we're going to miss the candlelight service. Probably one of the most, and for all the things that I experienced, this is going to sound bizarre, but probably one of the most frustrating moments of my life, because that's all I wanted. That's all I want. And now I'm rushing to get there. There's about 2 or 3 other side stories that spin off of that I'll leave to the side. We make it. We get in there. They're lighting candles and singing Silent Night, and I've just got tears just rolling down my face. Cleansing moment, So that was Christmas Eve. You asked me how Christmas was. So there's part of it. The next day is Christmas Day. The next day, one more time over, demonstrates the swing of emotions and the you can't make this stuff up and you have to be there kind of thing. And I might say some things on this tape that I'll regret at this moment, but whatever. So the day is fairly normal, but what I know is at about, can't even remember, maybe 5 or 6 p.m., 1700, 1800 hours, our Iraqi brigade counterparts that we're partnered with, Brigadier General Aziz was the brigade commander of the 3rd Brigade of and my gosh, I've forgotten the name of the division. And he has a command post that abuts Camp Liberty. There's a gate. And the gate to Baghdad International Airport and the American base is butted right up against this FOB Constitution, Forward Operating Base Constitution, where his Iraqi brigade is headquartered, but we're still separated by a manned gate. For all of the reasons that, you see these what's called green on blue incidents that are occurring, where insurgents infiltrate host nation forces and then use the opportunity to kill Americans. So we always had that gate man. And I had soldiers that were out there on that post all the time. Well, they invited us to a Christmas celebration. So, you're thinking, okay, this is going to be cheesy or crazy or odd or whatever, but this is going to be okay. Okay. All right. We'll be there.
You weren't afraid of danger at all, though.
No, not really. I mean, only in as much as you can be every day. I mean, you could be sitting in your containerized housing unit on Camp Liberty and have a mortar round come through the roof, which happened right across the street from my. I could tell that story 2 or 3 times where that happened. So you can't. You just anything can happen at any time. But we had established a pretty tight relationship with this brigade. We knew the inner workings of it. We knew the key leaders of it. And we let our guard down enough where we could go to something like this and relax with them. I mean, look, I've man danced and man kissed these guys. I mean, you hold hands, you dance in a circle, and they give you a kiss on both cheeks, all that kind of stuff. So I mean, we had forged an alliance and a relationship. Brigadier General Aziz, another one that I've had email contact with since I left. In fact, this conversation is making me think I need to reach back out to him and see how he's doing. So they invite us out for Christmas at Fob Constitution in Western Baghdad, Iraq. Bizarre, right? And you walk in the big conference room, and they've got this cheesy glitter stuff hanging around the walls, and none of it looks like a Christmas decoration, right? They might have had a goofy little artificial tree in the corner, and I think they were playing some recorded American Christmas music. So good on them, right? No foul. But it just feels, weird. Just like, yeah, okay, so this is Christmas, right? Anyway, partway through that celebration, my friend, my brother, come with me. Brigadier General Aziz invites me over to his private office. And doesn't invite, others in the room that are my peers or superiors. He invites me because I've built a relationship with this guy. And he hands me a Pepsi can. And I take a swig out of the Pepsi can, and it ain't Pepsi. It's got whiskey in it. And I'm just like, okay. Yeah, General Aziz, I don't know if my brother, it is okay. No sooner did I put it down than my brigade commander walks in the room. Now he's part of the party. I'm like, okay, this is awkward. This is all very awkward. And then literally, I don't really have another second to think about it. Then my PSO, Sergeant Weiser, sticks his head in the door and says, "Sir, we got to go." Not a good thing, right? So while we were in there partying it up on Christmas night, let's think about how the clock works. We were 6 or 7 hours ahead of American time. So it was probably 7 p.m., 8 p.m. on Christmas night, meaning it was 2 in the afternoon, 1 in the afternoon, back here in the United States. What 2 young families in the United States didn't know is that their fathers were killed in a helicopter crash in my sector. And so this is what's beginning to transpire. I didn't know. Helicopter, so we got to go. I get out. I'm like, what's going on? And they said a helicopter had just crashed in our sector, not more than about probably 5 or 6 kilometers from where we were sitting having our little Christmas celebration. So we load up and we head out, and we give directions to a couple of other platoons that are out to head out. And the support battalion had already been notified and was heading out, and I believe had already dispatched with an Iraqi fire truck to give them security to get to the location because the aircraft was an H-64 Apache gunship, which means it's loaded with rockets and all kinds of things that can blow up. And so we're all heading. All these units are heading out to that location, and it's a piece of dirt we'd been on a bunch of times because it was our sector, so we knew it. That's why we went out there. And I show up on the scene, and the fire truck's sitting there, and there's a couple of Bradley fighting vehicles sitting there. and I'm going to probably try to do the abridged version of this story because it's a tough one. And now there's about, I don't know, 30 or 40 of us. We've all shown up on scene. And meanwhile, the helicopter from me to that pavilion over there, so maybe just short of 100 yards, maybe 100 yards, is burning. And I'm beside myself. Like, what is going on? Well, sir, we can't get the fire hose to the helicopter. And about the time I'm ready to say we have guns and demolition, and there's no way that the answer is can't. That's what's cycling through my mind. Young Bradley, fighting vehicle section leader, staff sergeant, looks at me and says, "Sir, I can run my Bradley into that concrete wall and knock it down." I said, "Do it." So God knows how much time was wasted. And then, in a story that I'll tell when I'm 80 in a rocking chair and make it sound even better, I grabbed the lead of the hose and I started running for the helicopter. And then, I really don't know how to tell the story from there, except that it's one of those times that I'll never forget for the rest of my life, and for 100 different reasons. Probably the least, not the least of which is, once that wall went down, my men were on that hose like that. Nobody thought twice about the fact that rockets could blow up on that. We were on that hose and we were heading for that aircraft. And I'll see it for the rest of my life, But we put the fire out and we searched the area for anything, whatever, anything that might have flown out, whatever. It was really a bizarre evening in a lot of ways. And all I could think of, and I've told this story a few times since, is, in that moment when I looked in that cockpit and saw those deceased American dads, in that moment, there were kids playing with their Christmas toys back home who didn't know yet that their dad had died. And so that's Christmas in Iraq in 2005. Yeah. And then, so life goes on. Life goes on, right? That's how you end this story, and that tells it. Like, then the next day you
went back to patrol.
You're back on patrol. Do what you got to do.
Did you have any other memorable experiences for the remainder of your time?
Yeah, bunches, but let's go with just a couple so that we can get it all down. So a few weeks later, we are accompanying international CNN reporter Nick Robertson, guy with a British accent. If you kind of try to roll through your CNN Rolodex of people you've heard, tall blonde guy, British accent, does a lot of the international news. Embedded reporters come and go, and we had 2 or 3 or 4 of them. We had Jackie Leiden from NPR. We had Martha Raddatz from ABC. We had Nick Robertson from CBS. We were actually supposed to have, and this is all in my unit, we were supposed to have had, his name has escaped me now. He suffered a brain injury famously in an IED explosion and started a foundation. Bob Woodruff. We were supposed to have had Bob Woodruff on the day he got injured, being in a different sector in a different vehicle. He was supposed to have been with us. So that they come and go. This particular day, we had Nick Robertson loaded up, and it was an operation that we conducted with General Aziz and his brigade, our Iraqi brothers. And just to sort of give you the comical side, right? The Charlie Chaplin side of how things can go when you're conducting a joint operation with Iraqis. So we're all loaded up. It's the dark of night. We're going to head out under cover of darkness to this mosque, sort of out in the farm fields of western Baghdad and Abu Ghraib. And we planned everything out, ready to go. And he's got all his Jundi, Iraqi army men, Iraqi soldiers, Jundi. They're all loaded up on their trucks, and they're an odd lot to stare at, but they're ready to go. And because this is intended to be an Iraqi-led operation, because part of our strategic push was to get them to be in charge and do stuff, they're first, and we're following them to the objective area. And so we're ready to push the green button and go. And we got to go out of the gate of Fob Constitution and hang a left on Route Michigan to get out to the northwest corner of our sector. Left on Michigan, out to the northwest sector. All right, let's go. Right on Michigan. And we're talking about a convoy of probably 35 vehicles. You don't turn that back around in a hurry. So I'm like, we're done. They know we're coming, but not only do they know we're coming, they now have more time to react because we got to get this whole thing turned around to go out there to where they're going. So anyway, so that was how it started. It ends by us getting to this mosque, and there were lots of rules of engagement about entering mosques, right? Unless you took fire from a mosque, you could not enter a mosque. But the Iraqi soldiers could go in. So they commenced the operation. They went in, and they went in with mine detectors, and they found that there was a weapons cache buried in the courtyard of this mosque. And so it was game on. We all went in and took Nick Robertson, the CNN reporter, and while we were in the mosque, we had a little bit of sporadic small arms fire in the local village with some of my guys that were out off securing the perimeter. So that all sort of went down. And as that was wrapping up, I looked at Nick Robertson and I said, "Hey, listen, there's not much else that's going to happen out here today. We're gonna load up and we're gonna go back. So I think I'm going to send you with that platoon. You guys are going to head back, and I'm going to get you back out." He said, "Okay, thanks." It wasn't 5 or 10 minutes after he had left the objective area that a call came over the radio that American journalist Jill Carroll, working for the Christian Science Monitor, had been kidnapped and was potentially somewhere in our sector. I learned later that Nick was losing his mind in the Humvee, like, take me back. So they went and they headed back to the base, and for the next couple of weeks, we spent a lot of time out searching for Jill Carroll, and spent a lot of time searching for Jill Carroll and her captors, and evidence and information as to where she was, and talking to sheikhs who I knew where she was. So that was a very interesting time for sure. During that period, the last operation that we conducted involving her kidnapping was to kill or capture 2 members of the cell that were responsible. And the last intel that we got was that they were in a house that was rigged to be exploded. So I remember sitting with the platoon leaders that were going to be the lead on this mission, and essentially giving them to really boil it down, giving them the, hey, I'm not scared, you shouldn't be scared conversation, And so we had that whole conversation. They were ready to go, and gosh, I've skipped over some other stories, but anyway, and we got to the objective area, and we had a few soldiers stacked as you see them, they stacked on the building, and they went to knock the door in and couldn't get it. So it was one of the coolest, if I could just talk about cool guy stuff for a minute, one of the coolest things I was ever involved in was I was walking right behind the Humvee as we used a Humvee to open the door. It was badass. Boom! Hello, we're here. And we detained those 2 guys. Nothing blew up, thank God, and they were in fact part of the cell. And it helped to uncoil some of the intel about it. You can read all about that online too. There's like a 13-part blog story that she wrote when she got back home about her captivity and all that other kind of stuff. Just another day, saving babies, hunting terrorists, saving American captives. We saved another captive. I'm all over the place now. There was a French engineer named Bernard Planche, and he had been kidnapped in downtown Baghdad. He was there ostensibly, who really knows, but he was there as a civil engineer who was going to help reconstruct and rebuild portions of Baghdad and whatever. And he got kidnapped. And kidnapping was a business over there, which reminds me of a whole nother story. But so my guys are out, and in fact, here's how it's tied together. As we were out looking for Jill Carroll in the immediate aftermath, I mean, like literally, I'm back on track. So I told you that as we were wrapping up the mosque thing, Jill Carroll was kidnapped. And then I told you all about the next couple months of chasing her captors down and everything. Well, meanwhile, back in the story, that in that immediate, as we went to start to cordon off the area and try to stop all traffic and find her and do all those kinds of things, we sort of stumbled upon another captive, Bernard Planche, and we rescued him from his captivity.
You just happened to stumble on him?
I'll tell you exactly how it happened. I wish it was more honorable and amazing and heroic, but here's exactly how it happened, as relayed by the gunner in the Humvee, who was the first one to lay eyes on it. And if I had 10 more minutes, I'd remember the young man's name. Oh, it almost was there. Anyway, it kind of went like this over the radio. Sergeant? Yeah, what's up? I'm looking through my sights, and I got a naked man walking towards us right now. Because he didn't want to get shot, he stripped himself down, and what had transpired is, as we rolled up on this little hamlet, it was just a couple houses out in the middle of nowhere, right? Which makes sense. You stow away a captive out there. As we rolled up on it, they egressed. They found a way out and they disappeared. When his captors left the scene, he was like, "Oh my gosh, I can get out of here." He stripped down. He saw the American Humvees. He stripped down and he walked towards us with his hands up and no clothes on. That's how we saved him. But look, our presence made it happen, right? So we got to get some credit for that. So yeah, we recognize the name almost came to me again. Yeah, it started with a B. I can see him. Classic, just your classic sort of American soldier, short little guy, kind of stumpy,
Well, Kevin, this is a good opportunity to talk about, in between your stories, your relationship with your men. What was that like? What was their opinion of you? What was your opinion of the men that served under you?
You got 3 more hours and 4 more CDs. That question is probably more appropriately answered by them, but I can say with a lot of humility and a lot of veracity, just based upon the feedback that I've had over the years since we parted, that we never parted because of Facebook, right? It's the VFW of the 21st century. You never lose track of people anymore. That I must have done something right by them, because we were close. We were close. If we all have flaws, and not that this is my only flaw, but if I had any flaw, it was that I cared more about my men than about my bosses. That probably sums it up. And so yeah, I feel that we had a pretty tight relationship, and to be perfectly honest, a lot of it probably had to do with the fact that they knew that at any moment they could look to their left or right, and I might be standing right there with them. I didn't hang out on the base and eat ice cream and fiddle on my computer and make briefings and stuff. I was there with them, and I to be 100% honest, I didn't even have to do anything. I just needed to share in the risk with them. How hard is that?
That's big.
It's important and it's big. How hard is it? Do it, leader. Do that. And I think that's what carried the day for me in my relationship with them, is that they knew that. And that, if you're going to tell people, hey, I want you to get in your Humvee every single day and drive down those roads and potentially get blown up by this unknown enemy who's putting IEDs in. Just keep doing that every day for the next 365 days. If you're not willing to do that too, I ain't got the time of day for you. So that probably defines why I had the relationship with my soldiers that I did. Just thought of another funny story.
Okay, so you can go back to your story.
Well, all right. So we bring the naked Frenchman in, and as you might suspect, the French government really wasn't, I don't think, keen on having the American press blow out that we just recovered one of their hostages, because in the realm of that's everything I just told you is at the super tactical level. This is how it happened. This is what happened, and we did it. You blow that up to the strategic level, and the George Bush, we don't negotiate with terrorists, and the French amenability to paying ransoms to get their people back, right? Well, we just saved you all that money. We got your guy. Nobody knows about it. Somewhere in between all that is how I'll write this particular chapter of my book one day, which is, why did we get in? So here's what happened. So we saved Bernard, and they put him through the, there's a name for it, the CSAR, the Combat Search and Rescue, but that's not. Anyway, they put him through the debriefing process that you have to go through when you've been a recovered hostage. And then the French embassy invites us down to the green zone. Now, I think I might have told the green zone story earlier in this thing. I don't know. But they want to thank us for recovering Bernard Planche. So who gets to go? Well, Alpha Company, you guys were on the ground, and I'm your battalion commander, so I'm going to take you down there. And we load up in about 8 Humvees, and we go down to the green zone. And we go into Saddam's palace there, where the French embassy office is, one of his old palaces. And the way I've described it before, and I'm not sure if I've done it in any of our interviews, is for combat soldiers to show up in the green zone is akin to that scene in Star Wars where Han Solo and Chewie walk into that bar with all those weird things with, eyeballs pointing everywhere, and music stops and they look. We didn't belong there. You know what I mean? It's just, you got people in flip-flops drinking a latte in the green zone, listening to jazz music under an umbrella, and we turn the corner with our rifles strapped across the front of us, and we're like, sir, what's going on here? Bizarre. Anyway, we go into this paneled room in Saddam's palace, and they say, okay, the French embassy guys will be. I got a pretty good memory. I can't remember who those French people were that came in that room that night. It was just all so strange. But a couple of people from our State Department and a couple of people from the French embassy, whatever, come in, and they say, hey, we just want to say thank you so much for saving Bernard's life, and blah, 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 and repatriating him. And so we thought we would have a small celebration. And in come like 10 Domino's pizzas. You ready for this? These tapes, 10 Domino's pizzas, a bottle of champagne, and a bottle of Johnny Walker Black. And all my boys look at me like, And you know what? I let them have it. We figured out it was a 4-mile run from the green zone back to Camp Liberty. And, God may swear I was wrong by doing what I did, but it's too late. I already did it. We picked out the guys who would man the guns, drive the Humvees, and be the third eyes of security. And we let the other 2 guys that were in the back of the Humvee just be guys in the back. And we let them have a shot of liquor and eat some pizza. Well, we all ate pizza. But just another one of those incredibly odd moments that you can't make this stuff up. And we get back to the base, and I think we were all like, what in the hell? What was that? What in the hell just happened? Anyway, Bernard Planche goes home. End of story. Gosh, I don't know. Stories for days.
This was, you said, your first deployment?
Yeah, this is all.
Were you going to go back to Iraq again?
Yeah.
After this incident, how much longer were you in Iraq on this first deployment?
Yeah, we're winding it down. There really were 2 more, but there really were 2 more major points that I think that I'd like to recollect and recapture and recount. And the first is, no kidding, not making this up, 11 years ago today. 11 years ago this day, 18 May 2006, I lost 3 soldiers under my command, their translator, their Iraqi translator, and an Army reservist lieutenant colonel who was a veterinarian that was traversing the battlefield that day with us. And it was one of the more difficult moments, of the deployment for everybody.
What happened?
I just had a Facebook message exchange last night with the young battle captain who will never be able to forget that it's his fault that those 3 people were killed in action. They were, that platoon, 1st Platoon, Bravo Company, Triple Deuce. 1st Platoon? Yeah, 1-6. 1st Platoon. We're conducting what we called a vet cap. There's log cap, there's med cap, there's vet cap, and I can't remember exactly if the cap was an acronym or if it was the first 3 letters of the word capabilities. But what we did is we extended our U.S. capabilities into the Iraqi population to help them out. We do a med cap. We'd actually go out and check young kids' eyes and make sure that they were healthy and hygiene was good. You spend a few hours doing that in the village, you win some goodwill. We did those things. MedCap, we've been doing MedCaps for a long time. The idea of vet cap came around because we realized, look, we got all these farmers around here. It's their livelihood. Let's see what we can do. Now, we didn't, as an infantry battalion from the 10th Mountain Division, we did not have the inherent capability to pull something like that off. So what we did do is we provided security for folks that knew what they were doing. And so that could only come by the occasional and infrequent attachment of an organization to yours. And so we got Lieutenant Colonel Dan Holland and some of his teammates, who I think were based out of Sam Houston, Texas, stateside. And they were traveling that day with Lieutenant Rob Seidel, who was the platoon leader of that platoon, PFC Nick. First Lieutenant Rob Seidel from Emmitsburg, Maryland, 23 years old, West Point graduate, platoon leader for the operation. His driver, PFC Nick Cronoyer from, I think, Laconia, New Hampshire, somewhere up around in New Hampshire. And Sergeant Lonnie Allen, who was the gunner up in the turret of the vehicle, who was one of the first young men that I met when I first took command of my battalion. And back to your earlier question, I told my battalion chaplain, and I don't remember if I shared this already, I told my battalion chaplain when we first landed in Baghdad or shortly thereafter, I said to him, Chaplain, it's going to happen. The day is going to come. And when it does, I don't want to look at you and say, who's that? And I also don't want to have to look at you and say, why him? And I'll be damned. I never said who's that, but I always said why him, because I knew these guys. I mean, as best as a battalion commander can, when you have, organically I had 660 soldiers assigned, but by the time my task force was built out, I think I told you before, we had about 994 or something like that, just short of 1,000 people. That's hard to, but I did the level best that I could. And so those 3 young men, their Iraqi interpreter that I never really did get to know or know, and Dan Holland, who frankly I never even got to meet. He got attached, put on patrol, and out he went with those guys. They were just supposed to be out helping the farmers in that western farm field area of Baghdad / Abu Ghraib when we got notice of a blue bongo truck, jingle truck. You think about in foreign lands, those stake and platform type vans with the front flat, the driver's like right up on the window. Those are everywhere. our battle captain in the operations center got word that there was a blue bongo truck or jingle truck moving through Rob's sector heading to X, Y, or Z that potentially was carrying, armaments, IED materials, and the Marines had the Marines had actually chased it into our sector and stopped and didn't cross into sector. So Rob said, "Well, I'm this close to it," and the battle captain said, "Okay, I'm going to divert your route. You're going to go over here and you're going to chase this guy off and cut him off." They never got there because a catastrophic IED strike occurred on a dirt road alongside of a channel, canal, that literally split his Humvee in half, and killed everyone instantly. And that was just another one of those times. So we loaded up and we went out there. And, set them. This was May. This was this day, May 18th. This literally happened 11 years ago today. And it turned into a long day because, for a number of reasons, not the least of which was I was not going to leave a single piece of that Humvee out there for the enemy to exploit and take pictures of or anything else, and stuff was everywhere. So it was difficult for 100 different reasons that you can figure out. It's just a very difficult day. And I could go on and on about it, but it was a tough, informative moment for the battalion to lose those great young men, and then on the 19th of May we got up and we went back on patrol, right? Well, the 19th of May we were still on patrol because we were out there all night. We were out there all night long. In fact, I remember we had air cover. We had F-16s overhead, and they were looking down on us, keeping security for us through their lantern pods, the infrared pods. And the coolest thing happened. The coolest thing happened because, look, there wasn't a lot for the Air Force to drop bombs on at that phase in Iraq. It was a tough environment. It was an urban environment. And so it had to be incredibly frustrating for those guys to burn holes in the sky and not really do anything. And when you're a ground guy, you tend to disdain the guys up there, And that pilot came across on my radio net, and it was almost like he was sent to be my angel or whatever, soothing voice. He said, "Sir, this is, whatever, Falcon 1-4, checking in on your net. Just want to let you know I'm watching over you." Pretty cool. And then the other cool thing that he did that made you realize, God, this guy's actually switched on. I mean, he's really here with us right now. Is, we're looking for pieces and parts of a Humvee that got blown to bits, and he said, "Hey, I think I spotted a door over here. It's north of your position." I mean, it was there. So it was good. And the other cool thing about it is the battalion just absolutely was completely glued to each other at that moment. Like, nah, you're not going to mess with us. Everybody was switched on, and that's what battle does to you, whether you like it or not. It reaffirms your commitment to each other and the mission, and just making sure that if nothing else in this world, we're all going to be there for each other. I mean, that was just one of those times when you felt it through and through, even from guys 10,000 feet above you that didn't even know you.
Kevin, any one of these incidents is stressful enough. But enduring all these incidents is put you under extreme stress. How did you handle the stress of the job?
Yeah. I don't know. I think the answer is A, I probably just compartmentalized the hell out of things. B, C, A. A, I compartmentalized. B, C, A. Mostly. I think that those moments with my battalion chaplain were enormously important. Um, can't say enough good about him and what he represented, and the ear that he gave me, and the solace that the chapel itself gave me. I can't say enough about the core. I had 900 in my task force. I had 660 that were my battalion. I had 30 that were part of the mortar platoon that protected me on the battlefield. I had 16 that were the guys that typically, when I went out of the wire, were with me. I had 5 in my truck. I had 1 who was my PSO, and I had 1 who was my RTO. At different levels, those humans are what kept me going and kept me feeling safe and able to keep on keeping on. Um, yeah, and to be honest with you, whether it's the Baby Noor story or wanting, much like you've probably heard Vietnam vets talk about, wanting to put my boots back on the ground where that happened to Rob, wanting to be there again. That place will never leave. I will never get that place out of my soul, ever. And so I don't know if that's an admission that I didn't cope with it well, but it's just the reality. It's just reality. I'm sure you've heard it before. It's forever a part of me. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So there was only one more story, and I'll make short work of it. It was June of 2006, and we probably only had about maybe 2 weeks left of patrol time before we were going to hand over our sector to the next battalion that was coming in from the 4th ID out of Fort Carson, Colorado. And there's a small, shitty little town called OIF along the Euphrates River, OWESAT or OWEYSAT. The transliteration doesn't matter because they don't even get it the same on 2 signs in that country. And so we had been there before. We had flown into OIF on a tip back in February. It's a whole nother story. In a really cool air assault operation. And here we are at 10th Mountain Division, right? And that sector is owned by either the Marine Division or the 101st Airborne Division. And one of the things I heard anecdotally about, well, why aren't the Marines in there, is because they say, well, we don't go there. Well, that's all the more reason why somebody's got to go there. Long story. We air assaulted in there. We chased some terrorists out. We killed some terrorists. And that location where we went in on February 22nd under uncertain intelligence, which almost was enough to cause some of my superiors to say we shouldn't go there. Ultimately, that was the rat's nest where now in June we find ourselves going back. And in July, August, September, and October, after we're gone, an entire 10th Mountain Division battalion went there and stayed there to root the place out. A little bit of anger. We should have gone there and stayed there. So we flew in, we flew out, we did a one-night air assault mission. Pretty exciting stuff. I'll skip over that story, and I'll fast forward to June when we now have to go back there. And we have to go back because, and this is a super unfortunate story, but it was fairly widely broadcast when it happened. I think I wasn't obviously home in the United States, but my bet is CNN was getting mileage out of this one. There was a Humvee full of American soldiers from the 101st Airborne Division who got ambushed by Al-Qaeda terrorists in this crappy little area, and they were kidnapped. And the search for them obviously began immediately. But that's called a Dust 1 situation. It's an acronym: Duty Status and Whereabouts Unknown. DUSTWUN. So before you're declared KIA or MIA, you're Dust 1. Nobody knows what happened to you. And this Humvee full of soldiers, look, I don't know, but let's just call it what it is, essentially fell asleep at the wheel, literally, in their Humvee on an outpost and got snatched out of their Humvee. And there's much more to the story, and it's all fairly publicly available, but that's kind of what happened. So at this moment, when this happens, I've got, my battalion is spread out probably over about a 400 square kilometer area. I've got one company that's on security duty at Abu Ghraib prison. I've got one company that's positioned in a patrol base out in northwest Baghdad. I've got one company that's on Camp Liberty, and I've got another company that's operating in a farm field area southwest of the airport. And I get the call, and you got to remember this stuff happens quick. There's no, when an American soldier goes missing, boom, it starts. And in short, the call that I got was, you need to assemble 400 of your troopers, get on helicopters, and fly back into OIF and find them. I mean, it was like movie kind of stuff, you know. And I've used this story in my life a number of times because, in fact, I used it in the Capitol building 2 days ago when I stood in the General Assembly and felt and smelt and heard the bureaucratic approach, the slogging approach to things. And I said to the gentleman I was talking to, I said, you know what? The 101st Airborne Division has developed what's called the Gold Book, and it is the gold standard for conducting an air assault operation, and it's about that thick. And it says in it, you'll go through all these steps to plan in excruciating detail an air assault operation where you load soldiers on 6 or 10 or 20 UH-60 Black Hawk helicopters and fly in somewhere and discharge them and conduct the mission. And it says that in that big-ass book, it says that that process, by planning standards, should take about 18 hours to effectively plan. When General Thurman looked at me and said, you have 3 hours to put 400 troopers on 12 helicopters to fly into the Euphrates River Valley, I couldn't say to him, but sir, it's supposed to take 18 hours and I got to go through this planning process. I had to go to the whiteboard with my operations officer, draw it, tell him what I wanted done, and say, call everybody, let's go. And you understand the point I was making to that legislator. So it's another one of those best of times, worst of times things, because you're doing your skill and you're doing it at the combat speed, and it's invigorating because you know what I grew up in the 101st Airborne Division. I was a lieutenant in the 101st. I've done this. I get this. Let's do this. It was the hottest day of our entire it had to have been 130 degrees. And we were in all our gear, and we flew into a town across the river from OIF called Mufraj, which the Al-Mufraji tribe and the Al-Jabari tribe and all those families, and that just a bad place and bad people. So we knew going in that this is, wow, here we go. We didn't take any fire. We didn't have any casualties, but it also disappointingly turned out to be a dry hole. Now, dry hole in terms of we didn't find the soldiers that night, but we had some pretty cool and quasi-spectacular things happen in the world of American counterinsurgency efforts and intelligence efforts during that era, where we got faster and better at things. And we got a cell phone hit. We got a ping off a tower that told us that somebody was in the town that was involved, and it told us what house to go to. And we went there and we got the guy and we brought him back out with us, which then allowed them to pull him in, interrogate him, and go to the next layer. So we had success. We had absolute success that ended up in ultimately turning the tide on this thing. Unfortunately, they were all found KIA. They were never found alive. One of them was, yeah. So, but that was our last real action of the tour, and then at that point we just sort of shut things down and got ready to hand over to the next unit. And while I say that was our last real action of that tour, it's funny because things got to be high adventure and exciting as we became what I used to call the flip-flop brigade. Once you have effectively handed over your sector to the next unit, and it's their responsibility now to leave the wire and go out and conduct patrols, you can't do anything because you've shucked all your bullets out of your magazines to be counted and turned back over. Because the next thing you're going to do is get on a bus and go over to the airstrip and get on a plane and leave. So you're this is overstating a little, but you're helpless. You can, even if you wanted to load up in a Humvee and go help somebody, so you become what I endearingly call the flip-flop brigade. You're walking around in your shower shoes and your PT gear, and you're not doing anything, you're just waiting to leave. And no kidding, in the last 3 days while we were waiting to leave, we started to experience incoming mortar rounds on the base like we hadn't since the first day we got there. One went through the Connex, the mill van that we loaded our gear in, like right next to the tents that we were sleeping in, waiting for the bus to pull up and take us away. We couldn't get out of there quick enough. And then we did, and we came home, and the end.
Oh, you came home, that was the end of that deployment. You came home in June or July?
July.
How long did you stay home before your next deployment?
So it was supposed to be, if nothing had changed, we would have gone back 7 months later.
Your same exact units of these same exact men who just been there are going to go back again in 7 months? Mostly.
I'd be hazarding this guess, but probably 70 to 80% the same people.
So you already know that coming home that they're going to go back? That's
because the Army, the phraseology, and it was always a top secret document, but a lot of people obviously had to get their eyes on it to plan. It was called the patch chart. And it was essentially a waterfall that showed you when your deployment ended and when your next one was likely to begin. And it was always sort of, because it had to be programmed out because we were rotating brigades. There were only so many brigades, and your next time was for sure, your next deployment was already always pretty much known. Maybe even the one after that. So we came back, and it was July of 2006, and you might recall that the surge began in January of 2007, which had a couple different impacts on me personally. One of which I was serving as the Deputy G3, the Deputy Operations Officer for the whole 10th. So I gave up command of my battalion in I think it was late August, early September of 2006, which that's a whole nother CD in and of itself, because, I mean, just go back to your question about me and my soldiers, right? The Army just keeps on crunching along, right? Okay, you're done, battalion commander. Time for you to go and let the next guy take over. But what I know now, and I think a lot of other people know now, is that that's a really bad idea, because it takes a while to reintegrate your soldiers back home. I'm not saying anything that I don't have the corner on this. I'm expressing what we all sort of have realized. But I will say, even though we've all sort of realized it, in that moment, I don't think people were getting it so much just yet. And I was laser focused on it. I had 660 organic kids that I was taking back to Fort Drum with me. And I made sure, because I was made to, not because I made this idea up, you did a risk assessment of every single soldier going back home. What did they go through? What did they see, do? Who did they lose? What's their situation like back home with their family? How's this going to go? And you did that written paperwork, and it was sort of a finger drill in some ways for some folks. But what I made a point of doing is I said, I want to see so out of 660 folks, maybe 70 of them turned out to be considered high-risk returnees. Maybe 35 of them. And so what I told my leaders is, I want to see every single one of those high-risk individuals, or you, at a minimum, to tell me how we're going to deal with this situation. And while some might have considered that micromanagement. I considered that I gave a shit about my guys. And then if you want to be less altruistic about it, we're all going to be dealing with it. So why don't we think through it just like we would for military operation? Let's think through what's going to happen. So we spent a lot of time on that, and came back, gave up command of the battalion. It was all very difficult, but got through it. And now I'm serving as the division operations officer, and it's the surge. So I'm home, right? Quote unquote, I'm home, except now I'm planning the deployment of units in the surge, which is basically, I might as well be deployed because it's nonstop planning. And I had to stand in front of, and this is one of those other moments I'll never forget, I had to stand in front of the family members of one of our brigades that was in Afghanistan when the surge was announced. And I was the one who had to deliver the message to them. Hey, you know your boys were coming back in 2 weeks? Yeah, they're not coming back for 105 days. Because the surge, it just, just think of it, whether it's the old balloon analogy. If you poke in a balloon here, it's going to pop out over there. Surge was not simple. You couldn't create 3 more brigades in the Army to service the surge. So what you had to do is you had to extend people, and you had to accelerate timelines, and you had to do all kinds of things to get there. The odd second-order impact of the surge is that my old brigade that I was ultimately going to go back to when I was done being the division operations officer got its 7-month window extended to 11 and a half months, or 12 months, July of the next year. Just because of the way everything fell out, plus the red line rule that Secretary of Defense Robert Gates put into play that said, if we're going to keep doing this for a long time, now this is 2006, right? This is only 3 years in. We know how it played out. If we're going to be doing this for a long time, I can't be deploying soldiers at a rate that's worse, that's faster than 1-to-1. If they're deployed 12 months, they're going to spend 12 months home. If they're deployed 15 months, they're going to spend 15 months home. 6 for 6, 9 for 9, whatever it's going to be. So those rules were put into place at this roughly the same time the surge took over. And for anyone who's ever done any mathematical linear programming, that's what causes computers to spit out, there is no answer. But we all collectively figured it out, and it was patchwork and haphazard and bizarre. So from a planning perspective, I was sending some bad news to some 10th Mountain units for those few months. And then I got reassigned back down to be the deputy brigade commander of the 1st Brigade. So, my battalion was 660 of the guys in that brigade. Now I'm the second in charge of the brigade that was a 6-battalion brigade, 4,000 soldiers, I guess, in our task force when we were deployed.
And that whole brigade
went back. Yeah.
When did you go back?
July-ish
2007.
Of 2007. It might have been actually August by the time we got out of Dodge. I guess it was August. Mm-hmm.
And where did you go this time?
So the same process of reintegrating through Kuwait, which now by this time, you might remember I told you I built Camp Buehring in 1992, right? Sort of, kind of. And then I had to process through it in 2005, and now I'm back in it again. I don't want to see any more camp. No good soldier in their right mind that spent time there ever wants to see Camp Buehring Kuwait ever again. It's just hell on earth. It's a stupid place. It's a hot as hell stupid place. Here, I'll give you a G.I. Joe kind of story instead of a battalion commander kind of story. Just the ridiculous things that happen where it's 120 degrees, right? And you haven't got much else to do but acclimate and drink water and prepare to go into combat. And so if you went to the mess hall on Camp Buehring in your PT gear and your physical training gear, there were people at the door that would turn you away and say, you can't come in here in sweaty PT gear. And not to call names, but these were people who would never leave Kuwait. They wouldn't make it into Baghdad. And you're going to sheriff me about the sweat on my brow and my shirt? and deny me the ability. Camp Buring equals really bad place. Anyway, yeah, and then so we from there the brigade flew forward to Kirkuk Regional Air Base, which obviously just another commercial airport that got turned into a U.S. Army operating base. It was also an Iraqi Air Force base at one time, and it had the light side and the dark side. The light side was the side that had infrastructure and buildings that had light, and the dark side was the side that ran off of Army generators and containerized housing units. And like it or not, now I'm a deputy brigade commander, soon to be promoted to full colonel, and I'm living on the light side by the brigade command post. So I actually have a hard stand room. I also have a containerized housing unit, but I have my office is in a building, like a real building. And we start, so boom, we're in Kirkuk.
Going back now as the deputy brigade commander, how were your duties different? What did you do now?
It was tough. It was tough because I actually received counsel that was designed to slow me down a little bit, because I was such an active, aggressive, out on the street guy. I received counsel that said, "Hey, listen, you're in a different role now. You should not be out so much," and all that kind of thing. So that was hard for me to sort of figure out and sort out. It's always difficult to be the second in charge of an organization, particularly when you're I'm in charge kind of guy. But I sorted both of those things out, and I really sort of became a little more laid back because it was needed. It was just needed. I fit a bill. In the organization and in the climate that we were all in. And I sort of picked up the slack on things that maybe otherwise might not have been given the attention that were required. That's what a 2IC does. That's what a second in charge does. Anyway, in any environment. And so I
And was that your role for your entire second deployment?
Yeah, except for the times when the brigade commander was deployed or was either deployed in a command post or home on R&R, then I was in charge of the brigade.
You were promoted to colonel while you were over there?
While I was there, yeah. So Kirkuk was it was and is primarily a Kurdish region. It is the, what would you call it? It's sort of the buffer between what is known as Kurdistan and what is known as Iraq proper. The Kurdistan regional government is this oddball, sovereign, standalone government inside of the larger government of Iraq. And Kirkuk province, Tamim is the Iraqi name, which I think means liberty, actually. Yeah. Was always sort of caught in the middle between whether it should have ultimately become part of Kurdistan or remain part of Iraq proper. And that really that spells the tone of that deployment, because that's, whether it was a daily interaction or a larger strategic thing that was going on, that was always sort of at play. Article 140 of the Iraqi Constitution called for an ultimate referendum that would have voted on Kirkuk's secession from Iraq and integration into the Kurdistan regional government. It was supposed to happen while we were there. Never really did. I think it's still in the books, and it's very weird there in Kurdistan. But
how long was this deployment?
15 months. 15 months.
Maybe that's a memorable experience.
Yeah. Well. Yeah. Yeah. So I think broadly, without some of sort of those things where you can remember right down to the nanosecond, broadly, the main purpose at this stage of the game in 2007, working into 2008, it was much more about the transition of the security duties and apparatus to the Iraqis. And so one of the duties that I picked up as the 2IC was to be the set of ears in the brigade command post that was truly listening to all of those various, what we called MIT teams, military transition teams, and PIT teams, police transition teams, and BIT teams, border control transition teams, because we had interface with all of those elements. And a large portion of that was driven by the fact that the Kirkuk Police Academy was, much like Fob Constitution was down in Baghdad in the prior tour, the Kirkuk Police Training Academy was contiguous to our operating base. It was right out the back gate. And so I became sort of the regular conduit for information, person for supervision and oversight, and really director in some ways of the strategic approach to what are we doing with the recruitment process for Iraqi police and training them and getting them back out on the street. Now, that strategically doesn't mean operationally. I didn't train those guys. I didn't personally do it. Although I will admit that when they brought their first class of about 100 females in, I used my platoon because in this tour, unlike my previous tour where my 100% male infantry mortar platoon secured my movement around the battlefield, this tour I had an MP platoon, a military police platoon, which is men and women. Had a female platoon sergeant. So when they brought female platoon sergeant of the military police, when the police academy decided to have 100 female recruits come in to become part of the Iraqi police force, I said, hey, I got an automatic solution here. So that platoon sergeant, our platoon medic, and a couple of the other female MPs had the opportunity to get fully integrated into the training of those Iraqi females. And feedback from them a decade later was that was one of the coolest things they ever did in their life. They dug it. I mean, think about it, right? They were helping Muslim women be something, right? Pretty cool. So that was cool. So in some ways we were integrated at all levels. I made sure that they were equipped. I fought the bigger fights for them in terms of getting them the right equipment for the academy, or ensuring that from a strategic standpoint, we didn't make the mistake of recruiting only from the Kurdish regions of the province, because it was a highly blended area. Turks, Kurds, Sunni Arabs, Shia Arabs. We even had some Yazidi. Every ethnic category you could think of was living in that province, which is what made it problematic about who are we, what are we, whose government do we answer to, how do we run. So I did a lot of that. I was out at the Iraqi police station, eating a lot of good food and getting big. All right. More often than I probably wanted to. I mean, it was amazing. So let's go to G.I. Joe telling stories instead of emotional ones and leadership ones. I'd go out to visit my friend, Major General Kareem, the chief of police. And I'd come in and sit down on his soft couch by his big desk. And he would hit the little ringer, ding, 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 ding. And that door would open, and the young man would show up in the doorway, and he would yell at him. And my previous tour in Baghdad, I had picked up enough conversational Arabic and done a little bit of studying that I could kind of hang in some conversations. Now we're in Kirkuk, and they speak Kurdish, which is not the same. So I'm like, man, I don't think I can do this again. So I'm just going to roll with it. So he'd yell at him in Kurdish, he'd go off, and 15 minutes later, they've already been down to the market, slayed a fresh goat, cooked it up, 30 minutes later, cut up fresh vegetables, and laid out this, enormous spread. And we would, eat and eat and eat and eat and eat and eat. And it was good. It was amazingly good. So, yeah, I got a little big during that period of time. So that was one of my primary interfaces. The other primary interface was with the provincial government, with the provincial council chairman, a gentleman named Rizqar Ali, who was a legendary Peshmerga fighter back in his day, fighting against Saddam Hussein's forces, and the provincial governor, whose name escapes me, which says volumes because he wasn't really present for duty. He just kind of was there. But anyway, working with those guys and working with those folks and the United States Agency for International Development to get it was more of the nation building and rebuilding side of things at this point. Rebuilding their armed forces, rebuilding their police force, rebuilding their economy and their governance. And those are mostly the kinds of things that we were involved with during that tour. Yeah, I think there probably are many, but I'm kind of running out of gas. The only real visceral memory of a moment in time, and probably just because you showed me the picture today, is when Dick Cheney flew in to visit Masoud Barzani.
Right now, Dick Cheney was the vice president at
Yep.
this time because somebody 200 years from now maybe or something.
That's right. So Dick Cheney, the vice president of the United States, is going to fly in, and so myself and the brigade operations officer and the MP platoon that secured me and him, we all had the mission to move to the airport in Erbil and secure his landing and secure his egress off the base and back to the base and back to his plane and out.
Did you meet him?
Yeah, I should have sent you the picture because we got a picture of all of us standing in front of a C-130 that he was going to get on, and I'm presenting him with a challenge coin, and I don't think I got one back, and then we took a nice picture with him, and then off he went. But it was one of those, there's no gunfire involved in this story or anything. It was just one of those cool, fun days where we trucked on up to Erbil, and when we pulled onto the airbase, it was great because at this time we were operating in MRAPs. Now we weren't in the up armored Humvees. We were in the MRAP, the mine resistant anti-armor protection, whatever the acronym was, vehicle. It was the large, super tall, big, with V-shaped hull vehicles that we were using. So we pull onto the airbase, and you see all these Kirkuk police come running out, and they're like trying to stop us. And the driver of the first vehicle yells back at me over the radio, "Sir, they're trying to stop us. What do I do?" I said, "You just keep going." Because we're in 30-ton vehicles, and we have a mission. And so we secured the airfield, set up a forward surgical team, because as you recall, Vice President Cheney's health was not the best at that time. And the last thing we needed was for him to die on our watch, because the corkscrew C-130 landing gave him a heart failure or something, So we had all those bases covered. We got everything set up. The cool guy story of the day is I then got in, and I could send you a picture of this too. I then got in a level 7 up armored BMW 525i. The door must have weighed a ton. Had bulletproof windows and up armored doors. And I jumped in that bad boy with a 3-letter agency guy. And we threw our sunglasses on and we drove down to Erbil and did a recon of where we're going to go. Now, having spent 12 months in Baghdad with no less than 4 Humvees driving around at all times with all my gear on, and a few months in Kirkuk doing the same thing, now I'm just driving around in a BMW, with this cool guy. And he says to me, "Hey, see that red button right there? If we get in any shit, just push the red button, the windshield blows out, and we'll crawl out the front windshield." I'm like, wow, I'm living my Bond moment right now. And meanwhile, there's headbanger rock and roll music going on the radio. It was cool. It was cool. So Dick Cheney lands, he goes, he has his meeting with Masoud Barzani. Masoud comes back to the airport with him. I get a picture taken with Masoud Barzani, and Ryan Crocker, the former ambassador to Iraq, is in that picture. And just one of those sort of Forrest Gump kind of moments where you bumped into a little bit of fame, and it was cool. And of course, look, you can say what you will about any political candidate from any party, from any era, but at the end of the day, they're human beings. And while you might not you might not agree with their ideals from a political philosophy standpoint, if they're human and genuine, that matters. And Dick Cheney was human and genuine with those soldiers that were standing plain side with him that day, and I respected him for that. I thought it was a good showing by him. And then we were on our way, and that was the end of that.
What were your living conditions like at your second deployment? It sounds like they weren't quite as
austere, or
as
yeah,
the first one.
yeah.
So you had your own room. You were on the lighted side.
Mm-hmm.
You had real buildings.
Had real buildings.
Did you have a mess hall?
There was a mess hall, and I made it to the mess hall a lot more during this tour than I did in the previous one. But you had to drive all the way over to the side to get to the mess hall, so it was a bit of an adventure.
Were you on base most days, whereas your first deployment you were off base most of the days?
Yeah, I was on base most days.
So you could go to the mess hall 3 meals a day.
I didn't do that, and you could only go twice anyway because they would hand you an MRE at breakfast. That was your lunch, and most people didn't eat all that. And then you could go at night, but I don't know. It was a different sort of environment. The other thing I did just to sort of box myself in terms of this tone it down a little bit thing is I enrolled in a distance learning master's program at Norwich University, and so if I was on patrol till like 10 at night, I'd come in, and at 10:30 I'd start studying for my master's and do a few hours till 1 or 2 in the morning, and then sack out.
What, your master's in what?
Public diplomacy.
Did you finish your degree?
Yeah, well, yeah, and so that was part of the calculus as well. I thought to myself, Jesus, if I'm going to be deployed for 15 months of my life, I want, having done this thing for 12 months and knowing the difficulties that come with it, and the ugly feeling of mission accomplishment or not, and all that. I said, when I finish this 15 months of my life, I'm damn sure going to make sure there's something else that I can show for it. And so that's why I enrolled. And I thought, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, but I'm going to give it a go. And it was difficult because there were still timelines to be met and papers to be written and submitted and all those kinds of things. I carved out the time to do it, and I was fortunate that my brigade commander, the guy that I was the second in command for, recognized, understood, and allowed me to have the chance where, and I can only remember it really kicking in on 2 or 3 or 4 occasions over that 15-month period where I had to go to him and say, boss, for 2 days, I'm going to have to check out of the net and just go write a paper and get done with something. So I was fortunate in that way to do that. And then the other, so it helped tone down my personal operational tempo. It gave me something to do that helped me feel like at the end of 15 months, maybe I actually accomplished something. But the other odd and unintended consequences, it was sort of an art imitating life kind of thing that started to happen. Because at the same time we were talking about economic development in war-torn or third world countries and the value of microloans, I was down at the USAID office and we were doing it. So I'm in this virtual classroom with these young 27, 26, 23-year-olds who are waxing poetic about what they think about microloans, and I'm dialing in online because you have sort of an online dialogue, And I'm saying, well, today we handed out $18,000 in microloans. One started a taxi cab business, one started a laundry business, and here's what happens, and here's how we keep track of their success. And I was really doing the things that they were talking about. And so it was pretty unique, I think, that happened. It happened with microloans. It happened with non-governmental organizations and conversation. Pretty bizarre, but it was unique in that way.
Did you have any more downtime on the second deployment? Have entertainment of any kind, recreation?
I personally probably got to the gym a little more than I did during that first. There was no need for the gym during that first deployment. Putting that gear on every day was enough. But since I wasn't doing that the second time, I'd go over there. We had a little gym. I'd go work out in the gym every now and again. Which, the joke is, you're on deployment, you get prison muscle, right? Well, those people that do that, they must not have had a job to do. They could be lifting weights all the time. Anyway, so I did get to do some of that. In terms of entertainment, we did have a couple of USO shows come through. And in fact, oh, here's a great story. Here's a great story. And then we'll come back and then we might wind down. I don't know. So no kidding. One of the USO shows that came through was the comedian Dane Cook. Irreverent, just raucous humor. And the funny thing is my boys and girls in the Humvee, Humvee/MRAP would kind of, when you're burning time, when you're driving down the MSR, the main supply route, and you don't have anything else to do, and you're looking for IEDs and whatever, that just kind of, they'd run through some of this, some of his stuff, right? Some of his skits. And so they all loved him and they thought he was funny. And then we found out he was coming. It was great. And great show, made everybody laugh. And we had the bulk of our forces on Kirkuk Regional Air Base. And then we had a bunch of outlying forward operating bases that some were 2 to 2.5 hours by road or 40 minutes by helicopter flight. So we got him out to all of that stuff. And while he was at one of our outlying bases, we had a military working dog team there. And he mucked around with the dog and got bit on the hand. And so he did the show the next night back on Kirkuk Air Base with his hand all wrapped up. And he participated in a re-enlistment with me and my soldiers, which was pretty cool. We held the flag up and gave the oath. He helped hold the flag. We've got pictures of that. So that was cool. Now, check this out. I kid you not. About 2 or 3 months ago, Dane Cook came to Mohegan Sun Arena here on the Mohegan Reservation and performed.
Don't tell me he remembers.
And at the end of the show, he said, now I'm going to do something a little different. This is a comedy show, and I've had a lot of fun with you guys, but instead of an encore, since I don't really have those, I'm going to engage in a little bit of Q&A with you guys. And it's going to be funny because he's going to, whatever. He said, so just, anything you want to ask or talk about or whatever. And 2 or 3 questions in, a young man goes up and the whole time I'm thinking to myself, Jesus, I should ask him about the dog. I should ask him about the dog. And my date was like, oh, please don't. I said, okay, fine. And the young man goes up and he says, hey, look, I don't have a question for you. I just want to tell you, I was deployed and you came and did a USO show, and I just want to tell you it was a great night and appreciate all you did for us there. It might not, I couldn't identify him, and he could have been anywhere else. He could have been in Basra, he could have been anywhere. I just want to tell you, he said, yeah, and then he kind of did the right thing and deferred back to the crowd and said, how about a round of applause for all the service members and all that kind of stuff. And after that moment died, he showed a serious side, which for a comedian is always very poignant, I think. He did a great job of that. And then he went back into character and he said, hey, let me tell you something about these military deployments. And he started telling the story. I was like, oh my God, that's my dog. He's talking about it right now. Told the whole story, had everybody laughing about how he got bit by the military working dog. Full circle. I'm home. I'm the chairman of the Mohegan Tribe. Entertainer is on the stage talking about when he got bit by a dog, and that was my dog.
Wow.
Crazy. Yeah. Funny stuff.
Did you have any R&R while you were deployed the second time?
Yeah. The Army set the policy of a 2-week R&R. It took one during the first deployment. It was mandatory. You could not defer that R&R. You had to take it. So I did that one in Baghdad, and then took one during the deployment to Kirkuk as well, and timed that one so that I could make it home for my daughter's graduation. Hang on, I'm losing track of time. Was it my daughter's graduation or my son's graduation? Which really says volumes, because all this stuff I just told you consumed my kids' high school years. My life was so forward deployed during my kids' high school years, I missed a lot. My son was a hell of a football player, and he was a captain of the football team, and he was voted the most valuable player in the North Country in upstate New York, and I didn't get to experience half of that because I was deployed. So which one happened when? gosh, this is killing me that I can't remember. Uh, it was my daughter's graduation in 2008. Yeah. Yeah, so my R&R in 2008.
Was 2 weeks at home.
Yeah, and I landed in Watertown Airport, flew into like JFK or somewhere, and took a puddle jumper into Watertown International Airport, which is like 20 minutes from my house. Made it home that night, and high school graduation was the next day. So if any of that travel sequence had gotten jacked up, I would have missed her graduation. But made it home in time for her high school graduation, so that was pretty cool. Yeah. Yep.
When your deployment finished, your 15 months finished in Kirkuk, you came back home, and you're still in the service.
Mm-hmm.
Did you continue to stay in the service?
Yeah. So the return was on or about, it was in November of 2008, I guess. And I still had 6 months left to go in my master's program at that point. And I had been selected to command Fort Riley, Kansas as a garrison commander. And I remember the day I got notified, it was kind of strange. I was seconds from having to get on a helicopter to fly out to one of our outlying bases for a memorial service for a couple of our soldiers that had been killed the night before. And the brigade commander was on leave at that time. He was on his R&R, so I was in charge of the brigade, and I had to make this memorial service, and it was a 40-minute flight to get down. I couldn't muck around with time, and I had a telephone, like an actual telephone, on my desk because it was a DSN line, the Defense Switching Network line, which regular telephone, pick it up, dial a phone number, goes through the switcher, hits the satellites, and actually you can call another Defense Switching Network telephone, somewhere else in the Army or Department of Defense. That phone never rang unless it was bad news from the rear about, from our rear detachment commander, but hey, I got to tell you about whatever. And I never used it unless I had to tell the rear detachment commander, hey, we lost some soldiers, bad news. It was the bad news phone. I've literally got my gear on. I've got my rifle strapped across the front of me. I'm probably snapping my helmet, and the phone rings. God, I shouldn't answer that because I got to get to the helicopter. I can hear the rotor blade turn. But that phone's ringing. So I answered it. And it's a little old lady in tennis shoes, as they like to say, from the personnel branch who says to me, Colonel Brown, can you hold for Major General Humpty Frotz? I can't even remember who it was at the time. And I said, well, yes, ma'am. And he gets on the phone and he says, Colonel Brown. I said, yes, sir. He said, Kevin, just calling you. This is Major General Humpty Frotz. I'm just calling you to congratulate you. You've been selected for garrison command. You're going to command Fort Riley, Kansas. And I don't care at the moment for a couple reasons. One, I got to go. And two, I really wanted to be selected to command a tactical brigade. I did not want to be a garrison commander. So it was kind of a real melancholy moment, like, yay, thank you, sir. And I said, sir, look, I greatly appreciate the call. I know you understand you've reached me on the DSM line. I have to cut to the quick and tell you I got a helicopter waiting on me to fly me to a memorial service. He completely got it. He said, roger that. Go do what you got to do. Done. So I'm on this helicopter flying across the desert to a memorial service for soldiers that I watched fall in combat the night or two before. And the whole time I'm reflecting, and this gets deeply personal, and we're not going to go there, but I'm just reflecting on the fact that my next assignment when I'm done with this warfighting stuff that I'm doing is going to be as a garrison commander in peacetime back at Fort Riley, Kansas. It's a complete, what's the word?
Mind blown.
Yeah, I couldn't wrap my head around it all, and it just was weird. But I found out, we wrapped up that deployment, I came home, I spent the next few months burning accumulated leave, finishing my master's program, and going to pre-command courses before I went off to Fort Riley to take command.
So you got your master's.
Yeah.
Now, how much time did you have left that you owed the government before you were going to actually get out? Were you going to finish out your term as the command at Fort Riley?
Yeah. That was the goal. That was.
You got to Fort Riley. What was it like for you? Because this has to be a real shock to your system after being over there and in the thick of things, and now it must have been like dead.
Yeah, it's different. It was different.
How did you adjust?
Not well. And again, there's a lot of intensely personal time going on here. My marriage had essentially blown up at this point. My kids had both graduated from high school, and I'm going to give you the super short abridged version. I left upstate New York on my own and went and commanded Fort Riley. So I was, after all of this that you've just heard, I was living alone at Fort Riley in command of the base. It was a very difficult time in life. Very difficult time in life. But you asked me the question earlier: how did you cope with all those various stresses? And you learn in the world of being a long time service member that you put your nose to the grindstone, you work, and you get your work done, and mission first, and it's what keeps you going. It's what keeps you driving on. And I think, and I just said this last night at a Boy Scout event that and the topic was leadership, and and I reflected on a core element of the Boy Scout ethos, which is described as ensuring that these young men, and apparently women now too, at the older ages, from 12 to 21, I guess women can be involved in Boy Scouts too. At any rate, so these young people are taught to find a way to care about principles and causes that move beyond self-interest. That's what the Scout ethos. It's not part of the Scout law or the Scout oath, but it's part of their ethos. And I reflected on that 2 or 3 times to tell people that that's exactly what service to nation and serving in our armed forces is about. And so you literally, at least I did, and I know many others have, you literally, you put self last, and it becomes a conditioned response, and it's the way you live. And so even in these very difficult times of redeploying after all of that and being in charge of a bit, it didn't really matter to me, because what mattered to me was, what do I have to do to run this base? And then in ways that paid back that I didn't even realize at the time, how do I make sure that the 20,000 soldiers here at Fort Riley, Kansas, and their families can make it through these very difficulties that I'm feeling and going through myself? And I think that in the interest of time and my energy level and your time, I'll just say that the time that I spent at Fort Riley, it redirected me, and it caused me to put my energy into those very things. And the super interesting thing that happened, and that actually, as storytelling goes, got reconnected just within the last week or two, is I started taking care of people that needed to be taken care of. And right before I left Fort Drum was when this really is the wrap. I mean, this is the epilogue or whatever of the book in some ways. Right before I left Fort Drum, I knew that I was in a really bad place, and it just so happened that in the role that I was serving as the assistant post commander, because it was like the made up position before I transitioned to go to Fort Riley to take charge. They gave me time to spend in the head shed at Fort Drum to see how the base operated and all that kind of stuff. Well, what that ended up causing is it caused me to have to brief then at the time Vice Chief of Staff in the Army, General Pete Corelli, who was circuiting the globe at what was peak time in the Army for the suicide issue. He went post to post to post to post. I think he went to 7 or 10 different installations. We were the last one that he visited. Because he wanted to wrap his mind. You want to talk about a guy who was all in on, he was focused on, I'm going to figure this out. God bless him, because there's no figuring it out. But he was. So he got to us, and I told him, I said, sir, there's all kinds of PowerPoint presentations you can do and tell soldiers about the signs of and what to do and this and that. I said, but I think it's time we move to a more creative approach. And I've stumbled onto this thing called the Theater of War. And we had the Theater of War come to Fort Drum and perform in what was one of their first 2 or 3 performances, I think, ever. You're going to get some Forrest Gump, no kidding, this happened type things now. They just performed in England last week for the parachute regiment for Great Britain. They've performed on Broadway down in New York City. They signed a contract with the Department of Defense to go base to base to base to do this Theater of War performance. And the idea is, it's not a play. They don't get on stage and act and perform. It's a reading. And what they read are 2 or 3 different plays from Sophocles, who was both a philosopher and a general. And they deal with the issues of battle fatigue and post-traumatic stress and dealing with an injury and being an outsider when you have an injury and you can't be on the inside anymore, and all those kinds of things that are absolutely relevant to what our forces are going through post-deployment. But guess what? These were all written 2,000 years ago. 2,000 years ago, and they're relevant now. And the power of it, I don't know. It was powerful stuff. It was really powerful stuff. And God only knows how I bumped into Brian Dories, the producer, and how we established that relationship to bring him to Fort Drum. But when I got to Fort Riley, Kansas, I knew I was doing it again, and I was going to put my full weight behind it. And we did it a couple times out there, and we attached it to the Kansas State University team out there, and they did it, and it became what it is. So, just really good stuff. Two ricochets off of that. Full circle and maybe wrap up the storytelling. So on the comical, lighthearted side of things, what Brian did is he reached in to the motion picture industry and TV industry. And he got real stars for this. So when they came in and did this stuff, it was the readings were powerful because they were really they just sat at a table, laid out the scripts, and just read. They weren't costumed. They didn't get up and walk around. They just read. And one of the readings that we did at Fort Riley, there was a young former Marine turned actor who played one of the roles. His name was Adam Driver. About this time last year, maybe 2 years ago, I'm sitting in the movie theater and I'm watching Star Wars, and Darth Vader reveals himself as Kylo Ren, and it's Adam Driver, who I had chicken with out in Fort Riley, Kansas, when he was one of the guys on the reading for Theater of War. A deeper aspect of that is there was a young man who I met at Fort Riley. He didn't serve under my command when he was injured in Solder City. He was in the 1st Cavalry Division at that time. He showed up at Fort Riley, Kansas. He and I had a bit of a working relationship, and I could sense that things just weren't quite right for him. So he's just one of those guys that I put my arm around him and talked to him whenever I could. He and I ended up in a couple of videos that the Army marketed about, suicide prevention and taking care of each other and all those kinds of things. And it just never, I was always worried about him. And he and I both transitioned away from Fort Riley. I retired. I went to school. He got out of the Army. He went and did some things in California in a variety of different industries. And that corporate work that he was doing actually caused a collision of interest here now. And I discovered that he was no longer working for the company that I thought he had been, who we were working on a relationship with. But we struck up a conversation, and he said to me, "This is just within the last 2 weeks." Said he's written a book about his experiences, and I should tell you he was shot through the femoral artery. The bullet ricocheted out of his leg and into his platoon sergeant's chest, and both of them hit the ground. And the young medic had to make a split-second decision because he was not going to be able to save 2 lives. So he had to choose which life to save, and he chose Josh. So now Josh and that medic, for the rest of their lives, have that baggage to deal with. Because who knows, right? Josh made it off the battlefield, made it into the green zone, ended up on an operating table, and flatlined twice. Maybe 3 times. I forget how the story goes. But he flatlined. He was dead. World-class medics in the green zone brought him back to life, patched up his femoral artery. You see him walking around today, you think he's got no problems. He's got a lot of baggage, right? And he's still pressing on. So he wrote a book about all his experiences, and he now is on the circuit doing motivational speaking for those that are dealing with trauma. And if you can see, this is all tied to your question about how did you adjust from all those years of all that you did to now being a piece. This is how I was full-blown, full force into the importance of this kind of stuff that we're talking about right now. And in our email exchange we had the other day, after he said, "Hey, boss, I'm not doing that anymore with that company. Here's what I'm doing." I said to him, "You know what? I'm no poet, but I wrote a poem one day. I'm going to send it to you." And he wrote back to me. He said, I was tied to every line of that poem. I told him when I wrote it, why I wrote it, personal between him and I about what that was all about. But he said to me, he wrote #universe. He said, "The day you wrote to me, I had just finished a talk at Camp Zama in Japan. And I had invoked your name and told everybody in the story about a time when you walked up to me out in the middle of a crowd, put your arm around me and said, 'Josh, are you okay?'" He said, "I'll never forget that." And now that's what he's doing for other people.
You had a lot full circle story.
A billion, yeah.
How long did you stay at Fort Riley?
I commanded for 2 years, kind of standard Army business. Gave up command in July of 2011, and then I went on terminal leave. Instead of cashing in my leave, I just grew my hair and hung around.
And when did you officially retire from the Army?
The actual date of my retirement was November 30th of 2011.
What did you do? Well, first of all, what did you plan on doing when you got out, and then what did you do?
So I told everybody as I was approaching retirement that all I really wanted to do was be the K-State Wildcat mascot. Because I really didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. Because a lot of folks, whether they do a 2-year tour, a 6-year tour, or a 24-year tour, have lived the life of being told where to go, what to do, what's next, what school we're going to send you to, what developmental assignment we've got for you. And then one day you have to realize that it's up to me now. It's all up to me. And I had never given it a second thought. I just had never given it a second thought. The trials and tribulations of, my own personal environment and fits and starts, and just I didn't know. I hadn't done myself any favors in figuring out what was going to be next. And so I did what anybody in a situation like that would do. I packed a rucksack and went to the Appalachian Trail. Yep, within 10 days of my retirement, I was walking the Appalachian Trail. And I really didn't know how far I was going to go. I wish that I could have just done the whole trail, but for a bunch of reasons that just didn't work out. But the way I tell the story, and it's 90%, 80% true, is remember how Forrest Gump just stopped running? I kind of I just stopped running and realized, and I not to get super emotional or spiritual or anything like that, but there is an organization now, and I can't remember what it's called, but they do what I did on purpose with vets. They take vets to the Appalachian Trail and they walk it out. And I can tell you that in the time that I spent on the trail, I put some shit down, and left it and kept on walking. I got to a certain point. It wasn't because I was tired or out of food. I got to a certain point and I decided, you know what? There's only whatever it was, maybe 4 more or 5 more days until the fall semester starts at K-State. I always have said I'm going to earn my PhD one day. I'm going to do it. I'm going to go back to school. I'm going to get my PhD. So I came down off the trail. I mean, the whole Appalachian Trail thing is really cool. I hope to get back out this summer for a stretch. Because, you're doing all those things that your mom told you not to do. I mean, you're hitchhiking with strangers to get from point A to B. It's great. It's liberating. I hitched my way off the trail, got a plane, went back to Kansas, and on a probably Thursday afternoon, 3 or 4 days before the term started, I called the director of the Security Studies program, who I had met during my life as the garrison commander at Fort Riley, and said, hey, I think I want to enter the Security Studies program on Monday. And he said, I tell you what, let's meet for lunch tomorrow, and we'll talk about it. So I met him for lunch on a Friday. We talked it out, and he said to me, okay, go to class on Monday. And I said, well, but what about that? He said, don't worry about it. Well, you'll be considered in auditing status until we get everything sorted out. Just go to we figured out a course load right there at the lunch table, and starting that following Monday, after a couple dozen emails with various instructors to figure out where, I started class on Monday, August 19th or whatever it was, and boom.
So you went on to get your PhD in security studies?
Almost. I did so that was August of 2011. So from August of 2011 until April, May of 2013, I did the brick and mortar studies. And in April of 2013, I passed my oral and written comprehensive exams, which moved me into all but dissertation status, ABD. And in May of 2013, actually in stride with those last couple of months, my brother said to me, hey, the next elections are coming up. I don't know what you think you're doing with this whole PhD thing, but you need to throw your name in the ring and run for council back here for the tribe. And I said, well, okay. So I did, but it was kind of like okay, I'll do that, but I got to pass my comprehensives, right? So submitted my application packet, completed my oral defense, and got the congratulatory note. You are now in ABD status. You have 5 years to complete and defend your dissertation. A month later, in June of 2013, I found out that I had received the most votes for council, which moved me into the general election. So it was pretty clear at that point, I'm going home. I'm going home to Connecticut. My mother's health wasn't doing all that well. I'd already lost my older brother the year prior. And after I guess the shortest way to put it is after all that I had been through, and with all that I was trying to figure out and sort out, it just became the easy play to just go home. Just finally just go home.
And what were your new duties?
Here?
Yes.
Well, so the general election occurred in August, and I had the second most votes. I think it was missed by two. I joked with my kids. I have two kids. They're both tribal members. They're authorized to vote. I missed the top number of votes by two, and I said, "Did you guys not vote for me?" And then the joke continued, or did you just forget to turn in your ballots, which would be more like the two of you? And so I was seated on the tribal council. We were sworn in, I think it was the 3rd of October of 2013. And that afternoon we met in session, and I was elected chairman of the tribe.
And you are presently still the chairman of the Mohegan tribe?
Correct.
What have you continued to do, and I know there's a lot, for veterans?
It's funny. I was just gonna try to invoke Forrest Gump one more time and end all this by saying, and that's all I got to say about that, right? Well, so I look. I'll be completely frank. I as I was going through the adjustment, I got some counseling. And I'm not afraid to say it. And it's one of the things that I think a lot of veterans need to be willing to say is that there's no harm in reaching out. And as I was trying to come to grips with how am I going to do this, one of the things that became crystal clear is that I would never, I would never be able to let go. I would be, this is what this is all about, right? I would be a veteran the rest of my life. Good, bad, ugly, win, lose, draw. I would be a veteran the rest of my life, and you can't ever put that down. It doesn't go away. And if that was going to be the case, then I at least wanted to do whatever I could to be an active veteran, helping people out wherever I could and whenever I could. And so, sometimes in ways that are a little uncomfortable because I have to be more than just a veteran. I have to be the chairman of this tribe. I can't just carry veteran causes by virtue of my role. But the flip side of that same coin is, because of my role, I can help veterans. So it can become a difficult dance at times. I don't ever want that coin to get flipped in the wrong direction. But wherever I can, because of my role as the chairman of this tribe and the Mohegan Tribal Gaming Authority, I do everything I can, whenever I can, however I can, to support veterans' causes, big and small.
Did you join any veterans organizations?
Yeah, I couldn't help it. I got the American Legion nudge. Right? You're going to sign up, right? But beyond that, I haven't really officially joined any organizations. But for the fact that I am now a member of the advisory board for the National Museum of the American Indians, because Kevin Gover, the president of the museum, one of the subsidiaries of the Smithsonian, it's a Smithsonian museum, has begun the quest to ensure that Native American veterans receive the recognition that they deserve. As an ethnic category, Native Americans serve at a rate at least 3 times greater than any other ethnic category. By some studies, 6 times greater than any other ethnic category. And though I look, back to the beginning, right? Though I look more like my Irish dad, I'm proud of my Indian heritage. We're sitting here in Uncasville, Connecticut, named for the great Sachem Uncas, the original chieftain of the Mohegan tribe. And I can trace my lineage back 13 generations to Uncas, the great warrior that he was that led this tribe right here on the bank of this Thames, what we call now the Thames River. So I come from the bloodline of warriors, and I'm proud of that, and I'm proud of my service. And Kevin Gover and the folks at the National Museum of the American Indian want to make sure that Native Americans around the country are recognized for what has been tremendous service to a nation that frankly displaced them. And so I'm in terms of what kinds of things I'm involved in now, I'm on that national board for that effort, which has a projected goal of doing a ribbon cutting on a monument that we built right there on the grounds of the NMAI. I think the goal is Veterans Day of 2020 is what they're shooting for right now. So I have that effort, and then there's the obvious, which is the thing that will hopefully become a routine and respected event here at the Mohegan Sun, and that is the Vets Rock concert that we have every November, where we come together to recognize the service of veterans, provide potential job opportunities for them through a Hiring Our Heroes job fair, and provide them access to a number of great veteran service organizations, all under one roof, all in one weekend. We've done it for 2 years now. We're heading into our third. We're teaming up with the USO and American Airlines. It's going to be a great event. That's what I'm doing now.
Kevin, one last question. How would you say that your military experience affected your life?
It kind of like I said earlier with the good, bad, or indifferent, or the win, lose, or draw, it absolutely made me who I am, unquestionably. And if I was to pinpoint any one period of all of that stuff we've talked about, it would be the deployment to Baghdad from 2005 to 2006, and you know, is it an Oscar? I think it's an Oscar Wilde intro, isn't it? The best of times, the worst of times. It was the best of times, and it was the worst of times. As a man, I've never been through more pain in my life, and yet that year of my life, as painful as it was formative for my life in ways that I could never have asked for, nor wouldn't have asked for, but I'm glad that I had.